Hi, I'm Megan Brown, teacher and EdTech enthusiast. Thanks for joining me on this journey to learn and share meaningful ways to integrate technology into everyday lessons. So, you want to teach with technology? Let's get started. Hello, fellow educators. Welcome to today's episode, So You're Creating an Engaging Video. We are going to go through 10 tips on making a high quality and engaging video to use in an in-person class or for an online classroom for direct instruction. I'm using the definition of video as anything students watch with both visual and audio elements. So this includes both videos and screencasts. Videos are an efficient way to teach students new information, but they can easily become boring and students can tend to lose focus. I know when I was creating videos for my students at the end of last year, I really only focused on one way to solve a problem, and I didn't always use best teaching practices. I wanted to get the video over with, so I just focused on the algorithm, and I did not try to have students focus on their conceptual understanding. I realize now my mistake, and I do not want other teachers to make the same mistake I made. Using these 10 tips can redefine videos from boring tasks where students copy down information to engaging, interactive activities that allow students to use upper level thinking. Let's go ahead and get started. The first 3 tips we're going to look at are suggestions on how to set up your video and select information to teach your students. Our first tip is to keep the video short. We all know students have a small attention span, so to keep them engaged throughout the entire video, they should be between 5 and 10 minutes. Now, this does not mean rush through the information so that it can be squeezed into a 10-minute video. There's nothing wrong with breaking up difficult material into multiple videos or using multiple media. You could have a video teach one part. You could then do a podcast or a PowerPoint just to break up the information. It is much better to have 2 or 3 high-quality videos for students to watch over a day or two than to have one 20-minute video that gives them no breaks to process what they're learning. The last thing we want is for students to walk away from a video feeling like they just stepped off a roller coaster and have no idea what they just learned. We want them to come away from the video confident in their new understanding. Tip 2 to creating an engaging video is stating the learning objectives at the beginning of the video and referencing them throughout. This probably makes me sound like an administrator, but students need to know the purpose for their learning. By telling them specifically what they should know and be able to do by the end of the video, they can better self-assess and think about their understanding of the new information. If we're reminding them throughout the lesson, hey, this is what you're supposed to be able to do, it will get students thinking about if they've met the goal yet. It is imperative that we are constantly making learning goals explicit to students, because we can't expect them to learn if we don't tell them their expectations. The third and last step to setting up a video is activating background knowledge. Videos are essentially online lessons, and this is an important step in any lesson. Activating prior knowledge helps students recall what they already know about a topic, and it gives them roots to process the new information they're learning. We know students retain information better if it can be related and organized with their pre-existing schema. This step is easily forgotten. I know I have a hard time remembering to relate what the video is about to what they already know because I'm so focused on the new content. But if we want students to better make sense of their learning, this step should not be skipped over, even if you're trying to save time. Just remember, it's better to have multiple quality videos than one long video that does not engage students in their learning. Now that we know how to set up our videos, selecting content that does not exceed 10 minutes, stating the objectives, and accessing prior knowledge, let's look at how to effectively teach new information with tips 4 through 7. The fourth tip to making an engaging video is to use the video to tell a story and make information relevant to your students. Think about a time where a friend told you a great story. How did you feel when they were talking? Were you engaged in what they were saying? Did you ask questions to clarify information? Do you still remember the story weeks or months later? If you answered yes to these questions, you understand the value of storytelling. You can narrate a story and show pictures, or you could create a short animation with Powtoons. If you're artistic, you could illustrate your own story. I know whenever storytelling has been brought up in my graduate classes, it always stresses me out as a math teacher because the idea of telling a story in math seems like a lot of work to come up with an idea. But don't worry, we're going to get through it. Language arts is all about analyzing stories. I can think of countless possibilities of using storytelling to illustrate topics like hooks, theme, or imagery. Social studies in itself is a story. If you're teaching about the colonization of America, show the route of colonization. Tell the story of what happened. Don't go into the video thinking, I need to teach X, Y, and Z. Instead, think about telling a story and using all the elements of great storytelling so students will be engaged and want to learn more. Take them through a journey of a specific person or people. Where did they go? What did they see? How did they feel? Storytelling in science can be extremely effective. If you're teaching about how Earth's resources can be used for energy, tell a story about what happens to a droplet of oil when it starts in the ground until it becomes light given off by a light bulb. Have fun with it and be creative. I literally read standards and just brainstorm what kind of story I could tell. You might need to do some research to make sure you get details right, but it will be so much more memorable than a PowerPoint slide on the steps for how oil is used for fuel. Fellow math teachers, I have not forgotten about you. It does take some creativity to tell a story and teach math, but it is absolutely possible. Here are a couple things I've done. First, you could set up a situation, almost like a word problem, but just make sure that you're getting students hooked so they want to learn more. Create a situation that they'll care about or ask a question that they want to know the answer to. For example, you could make a video to teach percentages by showing yourself creating a TikTok and watching the number of views and likes increase. Then you can dive into a lesson on how you can use that information to calculate the percentage of viewers that liked the video. This is information that students will be interested in learning. My favorite video I've created so far was to explain how to calculate mean and median. I used a storytelling technique by conducting a short lab. I took out the cream of regular and double stuff Oreos and I weighed them. Then I posed the question, do double stuff Oreos actually have double the cream? I actually videotaped taking out the cream and weighing it, and then I added a screencast where I used the data to show the steps for calculating mean and median in order to answer that question. The goal is to intrigue students and get them interested in learning the new information. By telling a story, students will be engaged and they'll retain the information much better. Tip number 5 is to point out misconceptions. This tip is very simple, but it's also easy to forget. Obviously, when we're using a video to teach a new concept, we're going to share examples and we're going to explain the concept. But don't forget to mention the misconceptions and share non-examples, because these are just as important and helpful for students to make sense of the new information. Tip 6 is to show and tell the information. Emphasis on the show. The wonderful thing about videos is you can display information to students while talking and explaining. Because of this, videos allow you to use best practices in teaching by incorporating visuals and presenting the information in multiple ways. I'm going to list a few ways that you can make information visual to students in a video, so feel free to mix up ideas and present as many angles as you can so students can see the connections between information and will retain the information longer. One idea is to explain conceptual information using manipulatives. You can use online manipulatives, or you can even record yourself with a document camera and move the manipulatives yourself. There are plenty of websites that have online manipulatives available, such as mathplayground.com or didax.com, didax.com. You can even Google if you're looking for a specific manipulative and use a screencast tool to record the lesson. If you want students to be engaged, have them go to the website and move the manipulatives with you. That way they're experiencing the material themselves. Another option is to record yourself conducting a lab or using a screencast to show an online lab or simulation. You can teach through pictures and have students jot down their observations before discussing the details of the picture. This is always a great way to teach information in a social studies classroom. Videos should be more than just writing on a page for students to copy down notes and contain more than surface level information. It's important to tell students information, but don't forget how helpful it is to provide visual evidence for the reasoning behind what they're learning and staying focused on higher levels of thinking. This will be so much more meaningful than expecting students to remember facts they wrote down in their notes. The final tip in how to teach information in a video, tip 7, is to visually show the relationships between information. This can be done in many ways, such as the use of color or graphic organizers. The same colors can be used consistently to help organize information. For example, if you're dissecting a sentence for the parts of speech, you can consistently use the same color for nouns, a different color for verbs, etc. In math, you can show solving equations by using the same color on both sides of the equation for each step. Using color strategically helps students to organize and process the new information. Using graphic organizers with new vocabulary or concepts can also help show students the relationship between the concepts they're learning or between new concepts and their background knowledge. A lot of times we'll say these connections out loud or we'll write them down when taking notes, but showing the relationship visually can really help students make those connections and make sense of their new learning. To recap, the first 4 tips in teaching new information are to teach through storytelling, point out misconceptions, show and tell the information, and use visuals to represent the relationship between concepts. Our last 3 tips focus on student interaction and accessibility. Tip 8 is to mix up your media. If you want to teach the new material with a screencast, great. But try to break it up by videotaping yourself saying a few words or showing a quick animation. Another idea is to break up your screencast using different programs like PowerPoint, showing pictures, or having an online whiteboard. By incorporating different media into your video, it stimulates students' thinking throughout the video because they're getting a change of pace. This is especially important if you have a longer video, so students will stay engaged. Tip 9 is make sure your video is accessible to all students. It is really important before publishing your video to make sure that all the audio is clear, all visuals and text are easy to see, and check to make sure the video has the option for captions. If you upload your video onto YouTube, it will automatically add the option for captions, although it might not be 100% accurate. I have found that having captions is helpful not only if you have a student with hearing difficulties, but many students just like to have them to read so that they can read the information along with hearing it. In addition, many students may forget headphones or their headphones will be broken, so having captions can allow them to still get all the information if they have their volume off or turned down low. Think about how your students like to learn and make sure that those strengths are represented in your video. The last tip, number 10, is make sure your video is interactive and allow opportunities for self-assessment. There are a lot of things that you can do to make a video interactive. One option is to simply ask students questions throughout the video. Ask them to think about something or try a problem on their own. Even though you're not physically giving the lesson, you can still ask them to check in mentally and to be active in their learning. The more interaction students have with the material, the better that they'll understand. If you want data from your students, you can add quiz questions throughout the video for students to answer, and that will give you data on their comprehension of the material. I have a list of websites that you can use for this purpose in episode 1, so if you haven't already, make sure to check that out. Another idea is to ask students to reflect on their learning throughout the video or at the end. You could have them partway through the video write down a question they have so far. And then again at the end, ask them to check to see if their question was answered. You could have a quiz question at the end, or have students complete an exit slip where they rate how confident they are in their new learning. You could even have them write one thing that makes sense and one question they have in a discussion board after the video. It does not matter the exact strategy you use, but make sure you're doing something so students are reflecting on the objective. I know that was a lot of information, so let's quickly recap the 10 tips to creating an engaging video. 1. Keep it short, 5 to 10 minutes. 2. State clear objectives. 3. Activate background knowledge. 4. Tell students a story and make information meaningful. 5. Point out misconceptions. 6. Show and tell information. 7. Visually represent the relationships. 8. Mix up the media. 9. Check for accessibility. And 10. Keep students active in their learning. You do not need to use every one of these 10 tips in a video, but make sure that you are purposefully outlining your videos to engage students and provide opportunities for deep thinking and comprehension. If you put a lot of time and effort into making an amazing video, you can keep using it for years to come. It may be a lot of work in the beginning, but it will pay off later in time and student comprehension. Thank you all so much for listening. Please share your ideas for creating engaging videos with the 2 Teach for Tech community on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube at the number 2 Teach with Tech. I hope you join next week where we're going to look at Desmos, my favorite website to use, both in and out of the classroom. I talked a little about Desmos in episode 1, but we're going to take a specific look at all of the features Desmos has and how to use it in all subject areas. If you have any specific questions you want addressed, or you want to share your experiences, please email me at 2teachwithtech, the number 2, teachwithtech@gmail.com. Thank you, and we will chat soon.